From the 1st of October 2025, the Streetworks UK protocol comes into place for all streetworks operating under immediate urgent, immediate emergency, minor, standard, major works when the permit or notice is only required due to traffic management purposes or equivalent notice periods for works on private land. The protocol requires a set of changes to current working practices, and the chapters in this video provide an outline of the requirements for individuals currently carrying out streetworks duties. It is a legal requirement to follow the requirements of the protocol, which are outlined in this video. Compliance will be checked and non-compliance enforced by the Environment Agency. This video will guide you through the Streetworks UK Waste Classification Protocol process. In this first chapter, we will be focusing on how to determine if your work activity is within scope and how to complete the desktop risk assessment effectively. Let's begin with whether you're work checking to see if your activity is within scope. Work is considered within scope if you're operating under any of the following highway permits: immediate urgent, immediate emergency, minor, standard, major works, but only when the permit or notice is required due to traffic management. These definitions are outlined in the New Roads and Streetworks Act 1991. You may also use the Streetworks UK protocol for equivalent notice periods on private land. However, if your work falls outside this scope, you must follow the WM3 waste classification guidance instead. This will be works that are larger duration projects that are on major works permits or notices. The next step is completing a desktop risk assessment during the planning stage of each job where the Streetworks UK protocol applies. The time to complete the desktop risk assessment should be at the raising of the permit or notice stage. The goal is to assess whether there is a low, medium, or high probability that excavated waste will be classified as hazardous or not. You can download the official template from the Streetworks UK website, or you may be asked to use an equivalent version created by your organisation, which could be a paper or electronic version. The key is to ensure that whatever you use that is the same question set as the Streetworks UK risk assessment. The desktop risk assessment is split into 4 key sections: job details, Table A, central register check, Table B, desktop mapping review, Table C, risk assessment outcome. This section includes standard job information such as location, permit number, utility type, and highway surface type. Most of this data is readily available through the job promotion process. However, please note the following points. Utility type. This should not refer to the organisation undertaking the work, but rather the sector, gas, electricity, comms, etc. Surface location. This should be the exact dig location, as it will not always be known at the desktop risk assessment stage. The location should be marked as other if you are not sure of the exact location. Optional what 3 words. While optional, the Environment Agency are very keen on this field being populated. Coordinates should not be used instead of what 3 words. Table A checks whether previous Streetworks UK waste sampling has occurred within 50 metres of your site. For this, you will need to log into Street Manager using your organisation's account and search the location. Once you have done this, record whether the results were green for non-hazardous or red for hazardous. If any results for the surrounding area were hazardous, there's a high probability that excavated waste will also be hazardous. Table B is a secondary check that is especially important for unsampled areas. You'll need to identify any existing or historical features within 25 metres that could indicate contamination. You can use sources like Google Maps, Magic, Data.gov UK, Archie UK, and local planning data to identify these features. The form has a list of features or sites that you need to consider if they are near to your work site. The proximity of any premises that could be a source of contamination is important as it affects the risk classification. When you have measured the distance to the impacting feature, use these distances to determine whether the risk is high, medium, or low. It's important if you are taking measurements to measure the distance from the edge of the premises that could be a source of contamination, not from the center point. Based on your findings in Table B, you must indicate whether there is a low, medium, or high risk of hazardous waste being present on site. If the majority of observations are classified as low, but one is high, then the overall classification must be high. Finally, ensure that a copy of each completed desktop risk assessment is retained for audit purposes. As a minimum, records should be kept for 3 years, in line with your organization's document and record control arrangements. In this training video, we will go through the excavation process and what needs to take place on site. 1. Firstly, when you arrive on site, you should set up the site in the usual way, considering what signing, lighting, and guarding you need to complete the works and keep the site safe for road users and pedestrians. 2. Carry out your site-specific risk assessment and any other paperwork as normal, as required by your organization. 3. As you excavate the works, the surface materials, whether they are tarmac, concrete, flags, blocks, or other materials, must be stored in a separate pile, either for disposal or reuse. 4. Once the surface materials are stored, then the remainder of the excavation can continue, with the subbase and subsoils being stockpiled in a separate pile to the surface materials. 5. Try to think about the next team coming to collect the surface and sublayers separately. There should be a clear gap dividing the materials to make it easier for them to collect. 6. If you are going to reuse the materials back in the excavation, then the surface and sublayers still need to be stored separately on site. In the next video, we are going to talk about the site assessment that needs to be carried out to assess the materials. Remember that we can only assess the materials if they've been segregated. Once you have segregated your materials on site, you need to carry out a site assessment to classify the waste. In this chapter, we are going to show you how to fill this in using the Streetworks UK site assessment form. However, your company may have their own standard form, or they may ask you to complete the same questions on an app. It doesn't matter the format as long as the questions are answered. Here is where you can find the Streetworks UK version of the form. The assessment is to be completed after opening the excavation and once the utility asset has been exposed and is ready for the activity you are going to carry out on it. 1. The top part of the form, or the first questions you have to complete if you are using an app, should all be available on your job pack. It should be simple to fill in for you. 2. There are then 7 short questions to answer. Question 1. Are there any signs of asbestos fibres or asbestos-containing materials in the excavation? You should have had some training on asbestos awareness, and it is a simple yes or no answer. If asbestos is present, follow your normal company procedures. The rest of the assessment form does not need to be completed. Question 2. If your surface causes tarmac or asphalt, then the next question is a simple visual question, asking if the material is shiny, sticky to touch, and there is an organic odour. If it is all 3 of these things, then answer yes. Question 3. This is applicable if you have been instructed to use PAK spray and if your surface causes tarmac or asphalt. We are going to talk about spray PAK testing in Chapter 5 of this training, and once you have had this training, you will be able to do the PAK test. Once you have completed a PAK test, if the paint changes colour to a band 1 or 2 colour, then you should answer yes in this section. If not tested, answer the question not applicable. Question 4. The next 4 questions apply to the sub-base or subsoils that you have excavated. The first question is asking if the soil is stained an unusual colour, such as an orange, black, blue or green. If not, then just make this as a no. Question 5. This question asks if a rainbow sheen or coloration on any water that may be in the excavation. If there isn't, then tick or click no. Question 6. This asks if there are any pungent odours to the material, such as bleach, garlic, egg, tar, gas, or pungent and sweet smells. If you don't smell anything like this, then just mark it as no. Question 7. This is the final question and is optional to be completed if instructed to do so. It asks about the result of litmus paper testing. We are going to cover this in Chapter 4. Once you have completed this test, the question just asks if the litmus paper colour has changed to a high or low pH. If it has, then tick or click on the yes. 3. Once you have completed all the questions, you can finalise the assessment result at the end. 4. If you've ticked or clicked on no for questions 2 and 3, then you can mark the bituminous layer as green. If you clicked on yes for any question, then mark it as red. 5. If you've ticked or clicked on no for questions 4 to 7, then you can mark the sub-base layer as green. If you clicked on yes for any question, then mark it as red. That is the site assessment complete. Please note that if the material is going to be reused on site without adding any additives, then the site assessment is not required. However, if material is going to leave site and be reused elsewhere or disposed of, or it will be reused with an additive, then the site assessment is still applicable and is a mandatory requirement. Testing soil pH is an important step in correctly classifying excavated materials. Soil pH is not visible, but it can impact how we manage materials on site, especially when high pH levels are present. Litmus testing is not mandatory within the Streetworks UK protocol. It is strongly recommended to ensure that waste is classified correctly. Let's look at how to test using universal litmus paper effectively. To begin the test, your soil sample must be wet. If the soil is dry, mix it thoroughly with clean water to create a moist, workable sample. Now apply the universal litmus paper to the wet soil. The colour reaction happens quickly, usually within 10 seconds. Compare the colour of the test strip to the standard pH chart provided. If the result falls between pH 1 to 4, low, or pH 10 to 14, high, this is considered positive and site assessment question answered yes. If the result is between pH 5 and 9, it's considered negative and site assessment question answered no. Be cautious when you are doing the testing. If broken concrete is present in the excavated material, avoid testing soil near it. Concrete can artificially raise the pH and cause false high readings. This is important as it may be compared later to random checks using lab testing for accuracy. Now you can record the result clearly on your site assessment form. Soils with high pH are a critical factor in the classification of excavated materials, so accurate pH testing supports better site decision making. Polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs, can be harmful substances found in some bituminous materials, particularly those containing coal tar. PAK testing live on site is not mandatory, but is strongly recommended to assist in the identification of hazardous waste on site. Let's walk through the testing procedure step by step. Start by selecting a clean, dry and non-smooth exposed face of the bituminous material. This will ensure proper absorption of the PAK spray. Shake the PAK spray bottle well and apply it evenly over the prepared surface. Allow 5 full minutes to pass. This gives the spray time to react with any PAHs present in the material. Now, compare the resulting colour to the reference bands provided by Streetworks UK, which are Band 1, strong positive, Band 2, weak positive, Band 3 to Band 6, negative results. If the colour matches band 1 or band 2, record the result as yes on the site assessment form. If the colour matches band 3 to band 6, record the result as no on the site assessment form. And that's it. Always remember to conduct the test in a ventilated area, wear the appropriate PPE, and dispose of any used materials responsibly. The PAK spray test is a fast and effective way to help identify potentially hazardous materials. This may also be compared later to random checks using lab testing for accuracy. Under the Streetworks UK protocol, there is a requirement to carry out a small percentage of tests to check the accuracy of the site assessment that has been completed previously. The responsibility of taking these samples may be with the client or the contractor, and this will be decided on each contract individually. In this video, we are going to show this process starting with collecting the material we want to sample test. However, you cannot simply take samples from 1 or 2 sites. You must adopt a randomized approach to selecting the sites you are going to use for sample testing, and must be able to demonstrate how you propose to do this. Sample testing must be carried out by a trained individual, and samples taken from each stockpile of segregated waste. During your training, it will have been explained how to take a sample and what equipment is required. There is also more details on this in the sampling requirements document. Here are the tools that you may need when collecting your samples. Nitrile gloves, trowel, permanent marker pen, cool boxes, bubble wrap, courier labels, sample chain of custody forms, camera and notepad. You will also need the following sampling jars, tubs and bags. One 1 kilogram white tub, one 250 milliliter amber jar, one 60 milliliter amber jar, one 1 kilogram sealable plastic bag. To avoid cross-contamination between sampling different excavated waste types, trowels must be cleaned by pushing into the soil a number of times before collecting the sample, or alternatively rinsing with deionized water. Gloves must also be changed between each sample. So this is the actual sample process. Take one sample from each type of material stockpile. For example, if there's a pile of asphalt and bitumen, take one sample from that pile. If there are other types of materials, take a separate sample from each pile. For example, one sample from the asphalt pile, another from the sub-base pile. Samples must be taken before the materials leave the site, within 24 hours of excavation. It's best practice for sampling the material as it's dug up and stockpiled on the same day or shift. Each sample should be made up of material from 2 to 3 different spots in the stockpile, including one from the outside and one from the inside. All parts go into one container to make a single sample. Each stockpile should only contain material from up to 20 meters of excavation to keep the sample consistent. Take one sample for every 10 cubic meters of material. To give you an idea of the number of samples to be taken, less than 10 cubic meters equals 1 sample. 11 to 20 cubic meters equals 2 samples. 21 to 30 cubic meters equals 3 samples. Do not sample material from the excavation walls or floor if it's going to stay in place. Ensure that all sample amber jars are filled to capacity. Once you have collected the material, it now needs to be sent to a UCAS accredited laboratory for further testing. Place the collected samples in a cool box with ice packs or a fridge immediately. Before collection, protect samples using bubble wrap or similar packaging inside the cool box, or wrap each container individually. Complete a sample chain of custody form before samples are collected or removed from the site. And that's it. So now we've conducted a site assessment and, if applicable, collected our samples. We now need to remove the excavated material from site. You may recall that when you completed the site assessment template, you were asked to classify the material as red, hazardous, or green, non-hazardous. This information will be of high importance to the organisation moving the waste and will indicate how and where they transport the material. When planning how material is collected, it is important that you continue to maintain segregation of bituminous and sub-base layers. Even more importantly, you can only carry green, non-hazardous, sub-base, and bituminous in a grab or vehicle. If you have red, hazardous, sub-base, and bituminous, then they need collecting separately or ensure material is fully quarantined away from non-hazardous material. You must include sufficient detail on the transfer documentation, such as a waste transfer note to enable the waste to be traced to the excavation it was produced from. This must include the work permit number or work order number and excavation reference. Anything classified as red must be transported to a suitable disposal or treatment site. The information you provide on the waste consignment note should highlight this in precise detail, including waste EWC codes and estimates of concentration level of hazards. Remember to keep local records of all risk assessments and waste transfer notes. You may be asked to produce these at any time in the future. In this video, we will look at the storage on site of excavated material, segregation, collection, yard storage, transfer, and the associated documentation. All excavated material on site must be segregated into separate piles of waste streams. For example, bituminous in one pile and sub-base in alternate pile. This is to allow material assessment per waste stream and assist in the waste collection and transfer. In addition, the materials must also be separated on the waste transfer vehicle. Excavated waste is generally considered hazardous if the material or substances pose a risk to humans or the environment. Some examples of hazardous waste include asbestos, chemicals such as brake fluid, diesel, petrol, and coal tar. Depending on the site assessment outcome defined in previous videos, the material will either be deemed green, non-hazardous, or red, hazardous. This classification will determine the action required in respect of whether it then needs to transfer to a local depot for potential recycling or to a general landfill that can take non-hazardous or hazardous waste. In all cases, the waste material must be correctly handled, and all paperwork must document the material's current location, transporter, disposal site, and then exported to a designated waste transfer depot. The excavated waste material is only ready for collection once the site assessment has been completed and the materials correctly classified. Information on material classification must be shared with those collecting the material to ensure red, hazardous, and green, non-hazardous classified materials continue to be segregated from one another, both during collection and transit, to a location where it will be managed and/or treated accordingly. There are two types of transfer notes: a waste transfer note which is required for green, non-hazardous materials, and a consignment note which is required for red, hazardous materials. Each form must contain relevant permit or work order numbers and excavation details of where the material has been collected from. For consignment notes, an estimate of the hazard present and the concentration level of that hazard needs to be included of the form. Ensure the correct European waste catalogue numbers are captured for the materials. If the same company is producing, transporting and storing green, non-hazardous material in a depot or recycling facility, then only a record is required. If a waste transfer or consignment note is required, it may be completed in paper form, or on any contractor paperwork or app, so long as it includes all the required legal and Streetworks UK protocol information. It should be noted that most of the waste receiving sites will require a copy of the waste transfer note or consignment note. Here are some of the scenarios that you may encounter that would determine whether you need to produce a waste transfer note, consignment note, or nothing at all. For more advice on this and to understand what you need for your work, please speak to your line manager for clarification. In this chapter, we will go through the 6 essential steps for managing and reporting sampling results under the Streetworks UK protocol. This process is critical for maintaining compliance with the Environment Agency and ensuring our operations remain efficient and low risk. When we receive sampling analysis from a UCAS accredited laboratory, the first action is to complete the Street Manager Upload Certificate template. This document is downloadable from the Streetworks UK website and must be filled out by an appointed person within your organisation. The key fields to complete include location details, Ensure accuracy using what 3 words or postcode. Permit number and work order. These link the sample to the specific excavation. Surface location. For example, footway, carriageway or verge. The final 2 sections of the form require you to input the lab's classification of the bituminous layer and sub-base. Red equals hazardous, green, non-hazardous. Accuracy here is vital because the data feeds into the National Streetworks UK database, which informs future risk assessments and regulatory decisions. Once the template is complete, the appointed person must log into the Street Manager portal and upload the record. Why is this important? Street Manager joins up all results from all organisations that are inputting data. It builds a central register that will help support doing the desktop risk assessments. The Environment Agency expects continuous uploads, so it is important not to delay or batch submissions. Failure to upload promptly can result in non-compliance and may affect your organisation's standing with the Environment Agency, leading to the potential of increased sampling volumes. In addition to uploading to Street Manager, the appointed person must record each sample in the Streetworks UK quarterly results log. This Excel template is also available on the Streetworks UK website. Each entry must include sample ID, your organisation name, utility type, the sector your organisation works in, location type, public or private land, work type, based on the permit the work was completed, location, what 3 words or postcode, sample date, reporting period, for example, 2025 Q4, surface location and type, for example, footway, sub-base, central register result, based on the Street Manager database, desktop result, red, high or green, medium or low risk, site result, red, hazardous, green, non-hazardous, testing arrangements, use of PAK spray or Litmus paper, lab test result, red, hazardous or green, non-hazardous. The spreadsheet automatically calculates your compliance percentage. This reflects how closely your site assessments match the lab results. This metric is key to maintaining your eligibility under the Streetworks UK protocol. Quarterly returns must be submitted 1 calendar quarter in arrears. For example, results from Q4 2025 should be submitted by the end of Q1 2026. You should use the EAT1 reporting calendar to confirm submission deadlines. You must also send your completed spreadsheet to the designated Streetworks UK email address, which is info@streetworks.org.uk. You should mark the subject of the email as sample return, followed by your organisation's name. Why does this matter? Streetworks UK shares your data with the Environment Agency. Your quarterly sampling accuracy is reviewed for compliance, and if your accuracy drops below 70% for 2 consecutive quarters, your organisation may be suspended from using the Streetworks UK protocol. Suspension means reverting to the WM3 waste classification process, which requires lab testing for every excavation, which is clearly a costly and time-consuming alternative. If you wish to rejoin to the Streetworks UK protocol, you will need to submit a corrective action plan to the Environment Agency. The sampling burden for each calendar year is calculated on 2 factors. Factor 1 is the number of excavations completed within the scope of the Streetworks UK protocol 2 calendar years prior is used to calculate your sampling volume as shown on the screen. You can determine how many excavations your organisation completed within the scope of the protocol by running the following searches with Street Manager for the required reporting period. It's important to note you may have to shorten the search dates if you're extracting large volumes. For example, run 12 reports, 1 for each month of the year, and then combine them into one file at the end to get your total figure. Factor 2 is the sampling accuracy from the previous calendar year, which determines the percentage of excavations that must be sampled. Over 93% accuracy, sample 1% of excavations. 85 to 92.99% accuracy, sample 2%. Below 85% accuracy, sample 3%. Here is an example. Let's say your organization is calculating its sampling burden for 2027. The excavation volume from 2025 is 5,000 excavations. The sampling accuracy from 2026 is 90%. Required sampling rate 2%. Result: you must submit 100 samples for lab analysis in 2027, i.e. 2% of 5,000. It's important to note the following. Sampling should be evenly distributed throughout the year. There is an expectation from the Environment Agency that sampling will be conducted evenly across each quarter. For 2026, only 1% sampling is required due to limited lab testing in 2025. These are minimum requirements, and of course, organizations may choose to sample more frequently for assurance or internal quality control. Once you have calculated your annual sampling requirements, you must inform Streetworks UK and include the data used to make your calculation. This should be emailed to info@streetworks.org.uk. The subject of the email should be titled SWUK Protocol, the year, excavation volume, and the organisation name.